Hi, San Ildefonso. It's Tana from Bridge to Health New Mexico and the Espanola Fitness Studio, here to talk with you about your critical inner voice. We've already done a 30-minute session on this. This will be close to 1 hour on your critical inner voice. I do want to stress to you that this is a topic that can bring up deep psychological pain, sometimes trauma. So really encourage you to seek out a professional, a counselor, or a loved one, or a psychologist, anybody who you need to really delve deeper into some stuff that might come up during this topic. You'll see why when we get into it. As usual, all of the health behavior change stuff that we talk about together can come from, our behavior can come from a place of, like I said, trauma and pain from our past, as well as really good stuff from our past. So always be aware that when we're talking about how we eat, how we exercise, our motivation, why we do healthy or unhealthy things, it often leads back to things that we need more help from than just from a health educator like me. So encourage you to have that professional counselor in your pocket for when stuff gets heavy. All right. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen with you now. I'll be back at the end of the presentation, so stick with me. And as usual, if you have comments, leave them in the comments section of the YouTube video that you're gonna be seeing. Here we go. Let me share my screen. Whoops. There it is. All right, guys. Here we go. Your critical inner voice. Oops, looks like we're still loading there. There we go. Your critical inner voice. This might be a topic that some of you are already quite familiar with, or it might be a new concept for you. So I just want you to take a moment before we get into verbal descriptions of what it is and look at these pictures, and you'll get a good idea for what your critical inner voice is. I'll be silent and give you a moment. Okay, you probably have a pretty good idea of what the critical inner voice is. But officially, your critical inner voice is the critical voice that creates a pattern of destructive thoughts toward ourselves and towards other people. It's a nagging voice or thoughts that make up an internal dialogue, a dialogue inside of us that's at the root of much of our self-destructive behavior. So the behavior that's not good, we ask ourselves, why am I doing that? Some of that can be that nagging voice that's telling you to do it. I want to stress that the critical inner voice is not an auditory hallucination. That means it's not the same as hearing voices in your head, like somebody who's struggling with schizophrenia or other mental health illnesses that make you hear voices. It's different from that. Your critical inner voice is experienced more as a thought within your head than actually hearing a voice, even though we're going to talk about that voice usually does have a tone and has a sound of somebody in your past. But I want to tell you, it's not an auditory hallucination. This stream of destructive thoughts forms an anti-self that discourages individuals from acting in their best interest. I want to say that again. These thoughts are against you. and they discourage you from being your best self. So you can see why it's so important that we figure out how to quiet them. Okay, question number 2. How does the critical inner voice affect us? It's an internal enemy inside of us that can affect every aspect of our lives, including our self-esteem and confidence, our personal and intimate relationships, and our performance and accomplishments at school and work. These negative thoughts affect us by undermining our positive feelings about ourselves and others and fostering self-criticism, inwardness, seclusion, distrust, self-denial, addictions, and a retreat from doing things that make us feel good. It's pretty bad, right? You would agree with that. What are some examples of common critical inner voices? This might sound familiar to you, or maybe yours are totally different. Some common voices include thoughts like, you're stupid, you're not attractive, you're not like other people, you're different. Some people hear voices about their career like, you'll never be successful. No one appreciates how hard you work, or you're under too much pressure. You can't handle this stress. Many people hear voices about their personal relationships, such as, he doesn't really care about you. You're better off on your own. Or don't make yourself vulnerable. You're just going to get hurt. Does that sound familiar to you? What about one I hear in my work a lot, and that is, I always fail. I always get off my healthy eating plan. I always get off my plan to exercise. I always end up going back. That's a critical inner voice. Where do these voices come from? Your critical inner voice usually comes from early life experiences that you've internalized and taken in as ways that we think about ourselves. Often, many of the negative voices come from our parents or primary caregivers. As children, we pick up on the negative attitudes that our parents not only have about us, but also towards themselves. Our voices can also come from interactions with peers or friends, with siblings, from coaches, from teachers, from neighbors, from leaders in our religious faith. It can come from so many different places, but most often it's a parent, a sibling, or a friend. And that seems odd, right? If you grew up with parents, siblings, and friends who loved you, you can be surprised sometimes to hear their voices as your critical inner voice. But really, it's not so surprising, because if you think about the people who were most likely to have been pushing you and possibly critical of you, it would have been your parents, your friends, and your siblings. Next question, how is the critical inner voice different from a conscience, right? Some of you might be thinking, well, that's just my conscience, and my conscience is good for me, right? All right, I'm going to describe to you how they're different. Many people think that if they stop listening to their critical inner voice, they will lose touch with their consciousness. Their conscience, excuse me, not consciousness, don't pass out. However, your critical inner voice is not a trustworthy moral guide like a conscience. The opposite is true. The critical inner voice is degrading and punishing, and often leads us to make unhealthy decisions. The negative voices tend to increase our feelings of self-hatred without motivating us to change undesirable qualities or act in a constructive manner. Okay, so your conscience is something that makes you act better. Your conscience is something that makes you feel badly when you don't reach your potential. But your critical inner voice puts you down from the beginning. It degrades you, it derails your plans for a healthy behavior. So really it's the opposite of your conscience. Next question is the big one that we're going to spend most of the hour on today, which is good news, because you can quiet or conquer your critical inner voice. But how to? Here's a little preface to how to before I take you into lots of good exercises to how to quiet it. In order to take power over this destructive thought process of your critical inner voice, you must first become conscious of what your inner voice is telling you so you can stop it from ruining your life. To identify what the voice is telling you, it is helpful to pay attention to when you suddenly slip into a bad mood or become upset. Often, these negative shifts in emotion are a result of a critical inner voice. Once you identify the thought process and pinpoint the negative actions it is advocating, you can take control over your inner voice by consciously deciding not to listen. Instead, you can listen to the actions that are in your best interest. So, we're going to take you through exercises in a moment, but the first step to conquering your critical inner voice is to listen to what it's saying. Learn to recognize it for the enemy that it is. What's the best way to describe your critical inner voice? It can be thought of as a language of your defensive process inside your psychology, inside your mind. It has been defined as an integrated system of thoughts and attitudes against yourself and hostile towards other people that is at the core of an individual's maladaptive or not self-serving behavior, not positive self-serving behavior. The concept of the voice is not restricted to thinking, but is generally associated with mood, with negative mood, like anger or sadness. Okay, listening to the voice, that is, believing what it's saying, often leads to self-limiting behavior and negative consequences. In other words, people often make their actions correspond to their self-attacks. All right, so when you listen to your critical inner voice and you believe what it's saying and you act accordingly, you are acting not in your own self-interest. Being for yourself or against yourself. All of us are divided within ourselves. On the one hand, we have self-regard, taking care of ourselves. So we have traits and behaviors that we like or feel comfortable with. We have a natural tendency to grow and develop and to pursue our personal and vocational goals, as well as desire to be close in our relationships and to search for meaning in life. These qualities all make up who we really are. They reflect an undefended part of our personality and a friendly, compassionate view of ourselves. The positive part of us consists of our unique characteristics. Our positive physical attributes and abilities, our emotional temperament, as well as positive traits that we naturally incorporated from our parents. This positive part first develops and grows as a result of our parents and other concerned adults nurturing qualities and behaviors and the love and care they direct toward us. Then it is further influenced by what we learn, what we enjoy, and the experiences that facilitate our personal growth. The against ourselves part, though, is our critical inner voice, and that is the part of us that has turned against ourselves. It is the defended negative side of our personality that is opposed to our ongoing development. The voice consists of the negative thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes that oppose our best interests and diminish our self-esteem. It encourages and strongly influences self-defeating and self-destructive behavior. These hostile, judgmental advisor voices also warn us about other people, making us paranoid, promoting angry and cynical attitudes towards others, and creating a negative, pessimistic picture of the world. The critical inner voice exists to varying degrees in every person, which that's important to know. It's not just you. Everybody has them. People have learned to quiet and control them to different levels, but it's important to know that everybody has them. It undermines our ability to interpret events realistically. It triggers bad moods and sabotages our pursuit of satisfaction and meaning in life. These destructive internalized thoughts lead to a sense of alienation, a feeling of being removed from ourselves and distant from those we love. The critical inner voice is not a hallucination. It is experienced as thoughts within our head. If we listen to its destructive point of view and believe what it is telling us, then we will fail to challenge it, and instead we will act on it. Acting on your critical inner voice has a seriously negative consequence on your life. Although most of us are conscious of at least some aspects of our critical inner voice, many of our negative thoughts exist on an unconscious level. Sometimes we may recognize what our critical inner voice is telling us, while at other times we may be unclear about our negative thinking and simply accept it as true. We are often unaware of the destructive impact that these thoughts are having on our emotions, actions, and the overall quality of our life. So our last question here on this slide is, actually it's not a question, it's a statement. Challenge it. You have to challenge your critical inner voice. You can take power over your critical inner voice. When you become conscious of what it is telling you, then you can stop it from ruining your life by following actions that the thoughts are telling you. The challenge is to identify and flush out this internal covert operation. I love that. Think of it as a covert operation sabotaging your life inside yourself. In order to challenge it, you should be on the lookout for when you slip into a bad mood or become upset. You need to investigate what caused the shift, what happened, and most importantly, what did you start telling yourself after the event? What were the words that you heard in your head that put you in a bad mood? The fact that your mood shifted from feeling optimistic or relaxed to feeling down or irritable is probably a sign that you are interpreting the event through your critical inner voice. After you've identified your critical inner voice, listen to what it is trying to get you to do. What action is the voice suggesting that you take? When you pinpoint the actions it is advocating, that is the point that you can take control over your critical inner voice by not doing the actions it's telling you to. You can consciously decide to take action against what it's telling you, therefore acting in your own interest. You have to stay on the right side of yourself and not listen to your critical inner voice. The balance between our two different sides is delicate, and it can be easily tipped one way or the other. However, we don't need to be the victims of our moods as they tip back and forth between our positive and negative feelings about ourselves. By identifying the critical inner voice and the role it plays in supporting our negative self-image, we can take action against it and significantly change our lives. We can reject attitudes that oppose our best interests and diminish our self-esteem. We can stop self-defeating and self-destructive behavior. We can tolerate angry, cynical attitudes towards others. We cannot tolerate angry, cynical attitudes toward others that turn us against other people. If you emancipate or free yourself from your critical inner voice, then you will be free to engage in your pursuit of satisfaction and meaning in life. You will feel at peace with yourself and closer to those you love. You can enjoy a compassionate view of the world and an optimistic outlook on your personal life. So, how the heck do we do it, right? All right. Remember, the voice in your head is not real. It's just thoughts. It's just thoughts. We all have thoughts throughout the day that we don't act on. Your critical inner voice is the same thing. It's not the truth. It's just thoughts. You can choose what to do with those thoughts. You have control. You don't have to obey them. You don't have to believe the thoughts. I'm going to teach you an exercise in a moment to listen to what the thoughts are and to realize how crazy they are. You don't have to believe them. And as a matter of fact, it's crucial that you don't believe or obey them. You have the choice. These thoughts are not who you are. They are just thoughts. If you have a thought that you are the president, do you believe it? Are you the president? No. It is possible to not believe or obey your thoughts. For example, have you ever had a mean thought, wishing something bad would happen to someone? Maybe after a breakup or after somebody hurts somebody who you love. Then after you have that thought, then you feel awful for having had the thought, but hopefully you didn't choose to act on it. So there's nothing really bad to feel about, right? You didn't act on it. A good example of this is Albus Dumbledore from the Harry Potter series. He says, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are. It's our actions, not our thoughts." Okay, how to quiet that thought. Number one, you need to learn to recognize it. So you may recognize that thought when you realize that you feel like you felt when you were a child. You suddenly feel very young and you feel the same way that you felt when you were a child. That's a sign that your critical inner voice is too loud. Second, you can learn to recognize it when you hear a specific person's voice in your head. Again, that might be a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister, a coach, a teacher, a friend who was exceptionally critical of you. Or you may recognize that voice when you hear the voice telling you things that are simply not true. They are contradictory to reality. They're not true. So I want you to look at those three things again. You learn to recognize your inner voice. Number one, if you feel like you did when you were a child. Number two, you hear a specific person's voice in your head. Number three, if the voice tells you things that are contradictory to reality. Once you recognize it, the second thing to do is to hear the other voices in your head, the other thoughts that are smart, intelligent, realistic, productive. Those thoughts. Listen to those thoughts. Now, in parentheses, it says here, make sure those thoughts are grounded in reality. For example, if your critical inner voice is telling you that you're too dumb to write that book, and your intelligent thought is telling you that you're the smartest person ever to be born on this earth, your brain is not going to believe that. So don't say you're the smartest person ever. Listen to the thoughts that tell you that you're smart enough. Listen to the thoughts that tell you if somebody else did it, you're certainly just as smart as them. And if they did it, then you can do it too. So make sure your thoughts are grounded in reality. Number three, the third step in how to quiet your critical inner voice is to distinguish between those thoughts and between the productive thoughts and your inner mean girl or mean boy thoughts, right? It's kind of similar to number two, but you need to distinguish between your healthy thoughts and your unhealthy thoughts. Step number 4 is to make a choice about which voices to trust. You have to intentionally choose. I'm going to trust my productive, intelligent, helpful thoughts instead of my critical inner voice thoughts. The 5th step is important, and it's very concrete. You may have noticed that when you hear your critical inner voice, it speaks in the first person. That means that your critical inner voice pretends it's you. And that's why it's so hard to resist, because we believe ourselves. So your critical inner voice is going to say, I'm too stupid to write that book. I'm too ugly to wear those clothes. I'm too awkward to have that person go out with me. It speaks in the first person. Step number 5, a very important step, is to change the voice to talk in the third person. Third person is when we talk about somebody else. So to use those examples I just used, it would be, you're too stupid to write that book. You're too ugly to wear those clothes. You're too awkward to go out with that person. What this does is psychologically, it makes you realize that you're not a mean person. Hopefully, you're not the kind of person that would ever talk that way to somebody else. You're very comfortable talking that way to yourself, but not comfortable talking that way to other people. So by changing the voice to the third person, makes your psychology not listen to it. The 6th step in learning to quiet your critical inner voice is to talk back to it. And we're going to practice that in the next exercise. Okay, for this exercise, I'm going to give you a moment to physically stand up and get yourself 3 chairs. And I want you to put those chairs next to each other in the room. I'll give you a moment. Okay, do you have your 3 chairs? Now I want you to get 3 pieces of paper and a pen, a pencil, or marker. I'll give you a moment. On the first piece of paper, I want you to write down the words, the criticizer. That's C-R-I-T-I-C-I-Z-E-R, if you're not a great speller. Put that piece of paper on that chair. You can put it with a piece of tape on the back, or just put it under the chair or next to the chair or on the seat. The second piece of paper, I want you to write the criticized. C-R-I-T-I-C-I-Z-E-D. Put that on the second chair. Third piece of paper, you're going to write the compassionate observer. Put that piece of paper on the third chair. Now I'm going to walk you through an exercise, and it's really important to physically do this exercise. First, I want you to sit down in the chair that's titled the criticizer. Sit down. Close your eyes. Bring up a situation where you often hear your critical inner voice. I want you to Listen to the words that the critical inner voice is telling you. Really listen to the words. Hear the tone of voice. Notice how your body feels as the criticizer. What's your heart rate doing? What does your blood pressure feel like? What is your posture like? How do your muscles feel? How do your eyes feel? What's your breathing doing? Now, slowly open your eyes, stand up, and you are no longer the criticizer now. Move to the chair titled The Criticized. Sit down in that chair. Now, you are the one being bullied, being criticized. You are now the victim. I want you to notice how you feel. Feel your heart rate, your blood pressure. Notice other thoughts in your head as you hear the criticizer. Notice your posture. Feel your muscles. Feel your eyes. Feel your mood. Really notice. Slowly open your eyes, stand up, and walk to the chair titled The Compassionate Observer. Sit down in that chair. You are now a third party to the interaction between the criticizer and the criticized. You are watching the bullying of the victim. You are compassionate to both the criticizer or the bully and the criticized or the victim. You are compassionate to both. As the compassionate observer, I first want you to turn and talk to the criticizer. I want you to ask them why they are saying those words. Listen to what they say. Listen to their tone of voice as they tell you why they are criticizing. Notice their tone of voice. Notice how they seem to feel. Notice how they feel talking to you, the compassionate observer, about why they are criticizing. Listen to what they say. Now, turn your attention to the criticized or the victim in this interaction. Ask them how they feel. Ask them why they felt that way. Notice their tone of voice, their eyes, their posture. Listen and be compassionate. Now, as the compassionate observer, I want you to ask the criticizer and the criticized to tell each other what they just told you. And you're going to sit back while they do that. Listen to what they're saying. Listen to the tone of their voices. Notice their postures as they talk to one another. Notice the words they're saying. Now, okay, I'm going to come back for a moment and stop sharing my screen. Okay, we're back. I hope that exercise was helpful for you. If it brought up some stuff, hope you find a safe place to deal with that stuff. It can be both uncomfortable and very freeing to listen to our critical inner voices, to talk back to it compassionately, to put ourselves in the position of both the criticizer, understanding why they were criticizing, of the criticized, seeing how damaging it is, and then also as the compassionate observer, to take yourself as the third person. What I want you to realize is that you are all three of those personalities inside your head throughout the day. What's awesome about that is that you have control. We have control to control if we listen to those thoughts or not, to realize where they come from, to do the work, to really not act on them and have them ruin our lives. I'm going to take a moment here and find a video that I just think is really, really excellent that I want to share with you. So give me just a moment to find it. This is another really good way to understand your critical inner voice. I want to share it with you if I can find it here. Where is it? It's going to be here. Okay. If we were in the same room together, this wouldn't be as awkward, me searching for somebody. I mean, for something here. Okay, looks like I'm in the wrong drive. Let me get into another one. Oh, we've all gotten so patient, haven't we, with technology through COVID shutdowns. Speaking of COVID, we can talk about that while I'm getting on. So the Delta variant is coming back. So we at Bridge to Health New Mexico and are taking our measures from the CDC and are suggesting that people go back to wearing masks, whether you're vaccinated or not. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. But let's see, right now, I want to share this video with you. Here we go. All right, let me just pause it real quickly. All right, I'm going to go back to screen share. I'll come back when this is over. We're going to have to go through the ads, but that's okay. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that video. I thought it was helpful and clear how she described it. I encourage you to find some other videos. There's some great stuff on YouTube about critical inner voice. But remember, the keys are to learn to recognize it, to get my slide up, to learn to recognize it, to listen to your healthier thoughts that are intelligent, productive, and realistic, to learn to distinguish between your critical inner voice and your intelligent, productive thoughts, to make a choice about which one to believe, to change the voice to talk in the third person, and then to talk back to it as a compassionate observer. All right, hope you enjoyed this presentation. I will see you guys Monday for some kind of fitness class. I'll see you then. Have a great week. Bye-bye.